Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, DCJ.
Morning, Chair.
Morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Mzimela.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning, good morning. We apologize for this slight delay. Mr. Mybeck, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, as you know, and for the benefit of the public,
Yes.
this morning's session involves Mr. Gigaba's cross-examination of Ms. Mzimela. Now,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mybeck. There is something they have not done here, which will enable your picture to come forward when you speak.
all right.
I think they will help me with that because I don't know what to do. You know what I'm talking about. So as they speak, somebody speaks, they come forward and yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Mybeck. Now at least
We can see one another, DCJ.
much better.
All right.
Much better.
As I was saying, the morning session is scheduled for Mr. Gigaba's cross-examination of Ms. Mzimela. At all material times, DCJ, Ms. Mzimela was the Group Chief Executive Officer of SAA. You might recall that she gave evidence a long time ago on the 26th of June 2019. Much of the evidence that she gave related to the cancellation or closure of the Mumbai route. You'll recall also, DCJ, that more recently, on the 21st of June 2021, Mr. Gigaba was led in evidence in relation to many topics across a number of streams, one of which related to Ms. Mzimela's evidence in relation to the closure of the Mumbai route. And it's in that context then that her cross-examination takes place. So far as the documentation is concerned, DCJ, of relevance, particular relevance, is Transnet Bundle 8. And that is divided into various sections. I understand that your file should be open at section 2, commencing in black numbers, page 241. And it runs up until page 754. And what you find contained in that section, DCJ, is Ms. Mzimela's affidavit, and then Mr. Gigaba's application to cross-examine her. Mr. Gigaba filed two affidavits, an initial affidavit and then a supplementary affidavit. What we have also done is that we've identified Ms. Mzimela's transcript of her evidence in 2019 and also the relevant portion of Mr. Gigaba's evidence. The various members of the legal team have that. I had endeavored to ensure that the Secretariat delivered hard copies to you, but I understand that that hasn't happened and that you have them only electronically. Perhaps we can deal with that, DCJ, as it unfolds.
Yeah.
It might be something that you can catch up with later. I don't know to what extent the transcript will be referred to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
So
Okay.
if I could ask then, unless anyone has anything else to say, the representatives to confirm their representation, and then Ms. Mzimela can be sworn in as a witness. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Solomon, do you want to say anything before the witness is sworn in?
No, morning, Chair. Only to mention that my learner junior, Mr. Gumbi, Advocate Gumbi, will be cross-examining Ms. Msamela.
Yes. Okay. No, that's fine. In terms of the scope, apart from the meetings with between SAA, the Ministry of Public Enterprises, and the Jet Airways people, apart from that, how much else would fall within the scope of today's cross-examination? Mr. Kumbi? I think, Mr. Kumbi, are you
Yes.
muted? Okay, yes.
Chair, it's the issue relating to corporate governance that is contained in paragraph 12, 13 of Ms. Nzimela's statement, because she alluded to the fact that during the former minister's tenure, there was a gray area in respect of corporate governance. So we'll dwell specifically on that as to whether the prescripts were not followed. What did she mean when she was saying that there was a gray area? So those are the issues that we'll actually deal with.
Is there any reason why we should take more than 30 minutes?
I beg your pardon, DCG?
Is there any reason why I should allocate you more than 30 minutes?
Well, I think 30 minutes should suffice, Chairperson.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, all right then. In that event, then, Registrar, please administer the oath to Ms. Msamela.
Okay, thank you. Could I please have my video open, please? Ms. Msamela? Ms.
Msamela, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes.
Ms. Msamela, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
But can I see you?
Not on mute.
Oh, I see a picture that has got your name, but I don't see you speaking, but I can hear you speaking.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, now that's much better. On a light note, I just want to say, Ms. Msamela, at least I can remember that.
The strange thing is that I can myself.
My registrar.
Okay.
I see Mr. Gumbi on the big screen, even when Ms. Msamela is speaking. When somebody else is speaking, Mr. Gumbi's picture should recede. And then whoever is speaking comes forward.
Ms. Msamela, could you please try and speak up so we can see if there's a problem? Ms. Msamela?
She seems to have dropped off.
Ms. Mzimela?
Chair, can you hear me now?
I can hear you
I'm
now.
actually trying to see.
Yeah, I can hear you
Yes.
now, and you can hear me as well.
Apologies for that. I don't know what's the problem.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Chair.
Okay,
Yes, I can hear you, Chair.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you. I was saying, on a light note, at least I can remember when I see you that you did testify before me some time back, even if it's years ago, because earlier this year, a witness who was giving evidence in front of me told me that he had appeared before me and given evidence before, and I could not remember him at all, because so many witnesses have appeared before me, over 300. So I can't remember all the faces. But no, I can remember.
No, thank you, Chair. I'm honored. Thank you, Chair. I'm honored that you do remember
Okay.
me.
Registrar, please administer the oath or affirmation.
Chairperson,
Yes.
Chair, could I be granted leave to place myself on record? I
Oh,
appear
yes.
on behalf of Ms. Mzimela. The name is Lungasio. I see I'm being given permission to start the video. The name is Lungasio. I appear on behalf of Ms. Mzimela on the instructions of Bokwana Burns attorneys.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware there was legal representation for her, so we nearly overlooked you. So, but thank you for raising that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right. Registrar, please administer the oath of affirmation.
Mr. Mzimela, will you be taking the oath of the affirmation?
The oath.
Please state your full names for the record.
Sizakele Petunia Mzimela.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No,
Do you consider the oath binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mzimela. Mr. Gumbi.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mzimela, may I just take you to paragraph 12 of your statement?
Paragraph 12 of my affidavit.
Yes.
Just for the record, Mr. Gumbi, tell us where her affidavit appears on the bundle.
It's bundle 8, page 252.
252.
Correct.
Well, it starts at page 247, but you obviously want to direct your attention to page 252.
To paragraph 12, Chairperson.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Have you got it, Ms. Mzimela?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Okay. And thank you for availing yourself, Ms. Mzimela. I didn't thank you for availing yourself earlier on. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Mzimela, if we're to read paragraph 12, it says, my experience of the approach to the governments under the then Minister Gawa tenure was different. Under his tenure, they developed a very grey line on what would ordinarily be the board responsibility and duties, management responsibility and duties, and delegation. Do you see that?
I do.
And now, if you read line 3, it says that the grey line was in respect to the board responsibilities and duties. Do you see that?
I do.
Now, I'm assuming that the responsibilities of the board would be contained in certain documents or prescripts. If you turn to page 5, to paragraph 8 of the same bundle.
Yes.
I see that
I'm sorry, Mr. Gumbi. I think I missed that. You said she should tend to
paragraph 8, Chairperson. The very same bundle, yes.
Okay, all right. Yes.
So I see that a key government document between the board, SA, and shareholder. The first one is MOI, Significance and Materiality Framework, Shareholders Compact and Corporate Plan. Now, the board responsibilities and duties, where would they be contained amongst these key government documents?
So, firstly, Chair, I think it is important not to just pick one line of that paragraph, because the paragraph, and I would like to just read it again, so that I can make my point. It says, under his tenure, they developed a very great line on what would ordinarily be the board's responsibility and duties, management's responsibilities and duties, and delegation. So I'm not too sure that you can split out one portion of that paragraph and not read it in its entirety. That is the first issue. But in attempting to respond to the question that has been raised, I think that all of us would be quite familiar with what the PFMA actually stipulates as duties of the executive and the accounting officer. And so therefore, when I make those statements, it's also in relation to that. It is also in relation to what the Companies Act would specify in terms of what is the role of the board, what is the role of the management, and what is the role of the shareholder. And that would be my response, Chair. The documents that are paragraph 8 then would detail other elements in terms of the relationship or the deliverables that are expected between the shareholder and the organization.
Which document would be that amongst the one contained in paragraph 8?
Okay, so I mean, the MOI, I think all of us would be quite familiar with, in that it is a document that is set up with the governance rules for the organization, and some of the elements of how the relationship between the shareholder and the board would also be contained there. The significance and materiality framework is a document which would normally be concluded between an SOC and the board in order to highlight those matters that are reserved for the board. So that's what it would actually contain. In the shareholders compact is a document that was renewable on an annual basis, which would actually detail the focus areas or the key performance indicators or areas that would have been agreed on between the board and the shareholder. And the corporate plan is a corporate plan, as I'm sure you'll be familiar, which is actually compiled, internally signed off by the board, that talks to how we intend to operate our business and what the focus areas would be.
Yes, Mr.
Just before you proceed, Mr. Kumbi, I see, Ms. Mzimela, that there was a writing here on my screen saying that your bandwidth is low. I think Brett, I don't know whether it's bandwidth is low. I think that there might be something you need to do to make sure we are not going to be cut off or something, or you won't run out of the battery or something. Why is it saying Miss Mzimela's?
Oh, it's just to warn you if she gets cut off.
Oh.
Yes, that's not what happened.
Have we fixed it now?
No, I can't. She has to fix it.
Oh, but you said it's mine.
No, it's
I'm sorry. My registrar here is advising me. Miss Mzimela, did you hear the conversation? Oh, did you mute me or what? Miss Mzimela, can you hear me? Mr. Kumbi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, Chair.
Oh,
Yes, I can hear you, Chair. Can you hear me?
yes, now I can hear you. I'm told that there's
Chair.
something you are supposed to do that side to make sure that you are not going to be cut off.
Chair, I'm going to try and see if I can log on to a different network, if maybe that may help.
Oh, okay.
Please just give me a minute.
Okay, all right. We'll wait.
Okay. Is it better, Chair?
Well, I can see you quite well. It's gone for now. It was just a writing that was saying something like is it bandwidth? Yeah, bandwidth is low. So, it has come back. It says your network bandwidth is low. So maybe we should continue in the meantime, as long as you are aware, because maybe by the time it gives us a problem, we might be done. So let's continue. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kumbi.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mzimela, the question I was asking in relation to paragraph 12 was that the board responsibility, duties, management responsibilities and duties and delegation that you referred to in paragraph 12. Now, did it impact on paragraph 8? In other words, was there any infraction of the key government documents that are contained in paragraph 12? When you were saying there was a green, when do we say there was a gray line?
Chair, I will again repeat that, and I've spoken, to the various documents that are highlighted in paragraph 8. But as to the question that you are asking in relation to what defines the role of the board and what defines the role of the shareholder, that is governed by the PFMA as well. It's also governed by the Companies Act, where it is very clear that the board has the responsibility for the day-to-day running of the business, well, not the day-to-day running of the business, but setting the strategic direction of the organization. Management has the responsibility of the day-to-day running, of the business and so forth. And Chair, unless there is another specific question or in relation to that paragraph, I'm of the view that I have actually responded to the question. Well, unless you would like me to pull out what the Companies Act actually specifies.
Mr. Kumbi, I wonder whether it might not assist to, if I ask Ms. Mzimela this question. When you say, Ms. Mzimela, in paragraph 12, that developed a very gray line on what would ordinarily be the board responsibilities and duties, management's responsibilities and duties, and delegation. What actually do you mean at a practical level?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. For that question. You would note that, in paragraph 12, in paragraph 13, I go further to explain what I mean by that, by what is meant in paragraph 12. When I share that there were no proper protocols that were now being followed in engagement with the organization. And yet there had been established protocols. Let me give an example. Whenever there is any communication with the organization, because the board had the responsibility and authority of the organization, correspondence from the department would come via the chairperson, and matters, whether it be queries relating to anything that the organization would be undertaking, would equally come through the board, because the management reported to the board, and it was the board that had a direct line to the shareholder.
Would that be the case? Namely, correspondence from the department would be directed to the board, and then the board would direct it to management. Would that be the case irrespective of who in the department had written to the board or who wanted to raise an issue? For example, if it was the minister, would it go to the chairperson, that is correspondence? If it was the DG, would it also go straight to the chairperson? Or is the position that if it was the DG writing, he or she could write directly to the CEO?
Yes, so Chair, you're absolutely correct. If it was the minister actually writing, the minister would write to the chairperson of the board. The only person in the department that actually could also write and direct it to the CEO would be the DG, because he is deemed as the equivalent of the CEO of the department. So he would actually write to the CEO. And then we would also have other engagements in terms of established meetings with the organization, where there would be other representatives that are chosen already from the organization's side to meet with the department in the event that, in order to ensure that the department was privy as well to the organization's performance on a more regular basis. But what was unusual, as you would see, as I've stated in that paragraph 13, is to have a minister's advisor come into the space and getting involved in issues which are more, would have been reserved, for the board, the management, or anybody else.
Mr. Kumbi?
So I'm quite specific in paragraph 13 in relation to that.
Okay, Mr. Kumbi?
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me just unmute myself. Mr. Mzele, perhaps maybe may I just refer you to your transcript, which is page 24.
Transcript.
And it should be the third line.
You said page 24 of the bundle?
Yeah, of her transcript.
Yeah, where does it start? What page is it? 24?
It's page 24, I would say line 3, where it begins to say, are you familiar with the framework under which the SAA operates?
I suspect the page number must be wrong. When you give us the page number, look at the black numbers at the top left of the page.
Sorry, DCJ, might I just interject?
Yes.
Mr. Gumbi is referring now to Ms. Mzamela's transcript of her evidence, given on the 26th of June 2019. I did mention in my introduction.
Oh, that I don't have that.
Yes, you have it in electronic form. We haven't been able to get you a hard copy. What I would just ask Mr. Gumbi to do is just to make sure that he very accurately places on record the relevant passage, and perhaps he can identify and read it out. And perhaps you can follow in that way. If it becomes too cumbersome, we might have to make another plan.
Okay, my registrar is giving me another laptop so I can have a look. So I've got, is this page the right page? Is it page 24? Okay, all right. So that's page 24 of the transcript. And I see the date is 26 June 2019. Yes, okay, all right. I've got it, Mr. Kumbi.
Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 3, line 3, Chairperson says it refers to the question to Ms. Mzimela to say that, are you familiar with the framework under which SA operates? And her response was, yes, I am, Chair. And if you go down, Chair, it says, in this regard, obviously within SAA, there are various documents that existed, such as the MOI, the Significance and Materiality Framework, and the Shareholders Compact and the Corporate Plan. So the documents that I've just referred to, unlike the PFA, which are of universal application, these ones specifically apply to SAA. Is that correct, Ms. Mzimela?
Yes, they do, and that's correct.
Now, if they are specifically the documents that I've just referred to, is there any of them which the minister purportedly breached? When you say that there was a gray line.
Again, Chair, I think that you cannot actually read my response to that in the absence of reading the total conversation that does talk to the PFMA, that does talk to the King report on governance, and that all I do, I say, in addition to those documents, there are additional documents such as the following, which I then list as the corporate plan, I list as the significance and materiality, the MOI, and so forth as part of that. So the reason why I speak to those specifically is because we've already made mention of the PFMA. There's already been mention of the Companies Act and King's report on good governance.
Let me see if this will assist Mr. Kumbi. What are the things that you say Minister Kigaba did or did not do, which resulted in there being a great area in respect of the responsibilities of management and the board and the department? So if you could identify them or make examples to say, I know you have referred to Minister Kikaba's advisor, but if you could be more specific and tabulate them, as it were, to say, one, this is what was done which should not have been done. This is what was not done which should have been done. And then you can specify whether you talk about him doing that or not doing that, or you simply talk about his office or his ministry or the department. Would you be able to do that?
Yes, Chair. So I will again start off by referring to my paragraph 13, and maybe if I can just try and put certain things into context. The reason why, and I'm using it as an example, when I say there was a blurring of lines, and I use his advisor and how he was interacting with the organization as a very key example. I think further in my affidavit, or when I came through to the commission, I would have equally indicated that up until Mr. Gigaba became a minister, I was well aware that the previous ministers had advisors and had encountered some of those advisors, but purely in meetings with the minister. It was the first time that we actually had an advisor, and in my view, Chair, you must understand, the advisor for me is the advisor of the minister. So when he comes into the environment, I want to believe that he comes with the mandate from the minister. And he now starts to come into our environment to request information directly, which ordinarily would not have been requested in that manner. If there was any information that was required of the organization, it would either have come through from the minister writing to the chairperson, or as you indicated earlier, from the DG writing to myself requesting such information. But now, I mean, there is an individual who, for me, represents the office of the minister. As far as I know, I mean, he didn't have any other role except being the advisor of the minister. So he represents the office of the minister. And he now comes into the environment to request information which actually, ordinarily, the shareholder probably should not even be requesting, as it pertains to issues of procurement and everything else, I mean, that we're doing within that space. That is one example. I mean, other examples would pertain to possibly then talking a little bit further in terms of the two meetings that took place in relation to the Jet Airways matter. And my example around that as well is that the Jet Airways issue was a root discussion, not a financial discussion, a root discussion which would ordinarily be held at a certain level of management, escalated, I mean, to the board for approval. But now we had a situation where the department was getting so involved in these discussions to a point of even asking us for information which you would need to have on hand in order to conduct analysis of the route. Now that for me is getting very operationally involved in the business in itself. I will stop there, Chair, unless I mean there are any more examples that you would like me to give.
Okay, Mr. Kumbi.
Yeah, I would attempt to ask direct questions because those ones that require explanation would consume much of the time that have been allocated to me. Then the last question with regard to paragraph 12, Ms. Mzimela, is that when did you for the first time realize about the gray area, the gray line that has developed? Was it immediately after the minister was appointed, which was November, or when exactly?
I think when I make, Chair, in response to you, when I make the statement in paragraph 2, it is not specific to a particular time frame, but I'm in paragraph 12, I'm referring to the period, the whole period in which the experience, the tenure of Mr. Gigaba's role as the minister when I was at SAA. So it's not as if I would say I realized in the first month, in the second month, in the third month. I'm basically reflecting on the period that I was at SAA at the point at which Minister Gigaba is the minister in charge of the department.
On the very first meeting that you had, the 10th January meeting, where the minister had called you for a briefing in relation to SAA and Jet Airways, did you, during that briefing, just tell the minister that there was some gray line that has been developed since he was appointed?
No, Chair, I had no reason to be having a conversation with the minister about gray lines that would have developed. And I think that, as you correctly indicate, the minister had started in November. We have a meeting with him, is it what, January? I don't think that one would be in a position to already be saying there are gray areas that have already been observed in that first meeting. That was not the purpose of the meeting. In that meeting, the minister had requested a meeting with the chairperson, and therefore I was supposed to be attending that meeting together with the chairperson.
You were already, when the minister was appointed, in the aviation industry for more than 15 years. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
You were familiar with the prescripts, the PFMA, and also the MOIs that were applicable to SAA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Isn't that accords with good corporate governance that you see the minister, who is just 2 months being appointed, to say, Minister, as the CEO, can I advise you on some certain prescripts which are applicable?
No, Chair, I don't believe that that would have been my role. I mean, my role, I mean, as the group CEO is to run the organization. And in reference, I mean, to that first meeting, I mean, as well, the minister had sent an invitation to the chairperson of the board, which is the correct way to request a meeting. The minister had actually indicated that he would want to, you know, or at least, I mean, I had to provide a brief on what our relationship with Jet Airways was like, or what are the things that we're discussing with Jet Airways at that point in time. So that was my role going into that meeting of January. I do not believe that it was my place, you know, in January to already be having a discussion with the minister to say this might be a potential gray line. I do want to believe, however, that possibly if the invitation to the minister had been a lot more detailed, maybe that's something that the chair of the board would have dealt with, but it was not in my ambit to have that discussion with the minister.
Were you not concerned to say the minister had called a meeting on issues that are operational, then instead of your counterpart being the Director General of the department dealing with operational issues?
Again, Chair, I will repeat, the invitation came through the chair. The invitation came through the chair. The chair then said, we have to attend the meeting. So I have no reason at that point in time, prior to the meeting, to be concerned about the way in which the meeting has been called, because the invitation came through the chairperson. Had the meeting come through directly, meeting request come through to me directly, then you are absolutely correct that that is something that I would have actually probably even raised with my chairperson to say, I do not understand why the invitation is coming directly to myself.
When the meeting was called, the first and the second meeting, the one in Cape Town, you raised a concern about minister's silence in the meeting after you had briefed him about the dangers inherent in the Mumbai and South African route. Is that correct?
No. I think that I raised concern, Chair, about minister's silence in the way that the Jet Airways representative speaks to us within that meeting.
That concern, why was it not addressed to the minister?
Chair, maybe I need a little bit of clarity, because I think that I'm probably confused, Chair, as to what the question is. So this is what happens in a meeting, and I describe what happens in the meeting, and post the meeting, I raise those very concerns that I have raised in my affidavit to my chairperson. And which is why when she came to the commission, she actually indicated as such. She indicated that immediately after attending this meeting, I raised both myself and the other board representative raised the concerns with her.
Mr. Gumbi, I would understand your question of asking the witness why she didn't raise that issue with the minister at the meeting if your client's version was to deny that he was silent. But my recollection is that his version is not to deny that he was silent. I understood him to admit that he was silent, but that his explanation is that is the way he chose to handle the meeting. So I'm just saying, if you are not denying that he was silent, I'm not sure that I understand why you would ask why the witness didn't raise the question at the meeting.
Chair, in the statement in also during her testimony, she raised a concern about the fact that after she briefed the minister about the danger inherent in the Mumbai South African route, The minister never said anything in that meeting. In fact, she was expecting the minister to have reacted either in her favor or to object to the pressure that has been put by Mr. Goel from the Jet Airways, yes. So according to her silence, the minister's silence demonstrated that the minister was not in support of her contention about the closure, the fact that the Mumbai road, Mombasa SA Mumbai road should not be closed.
Well, but your question is not about whether it should be closed, whether the minister supported or didn't support. Your question is, why didn't she raise her concern about the minister's silence at the meeting? So I was simply saying, I'm not sure that I understand why you would ask that question where it's common cause that the minister was silent and the explanation he has given is a certain explanation. Maybe you are still going to come to the issue that you are raising, namely whether her understanding, what she made of the minister's silence, whether she understood it to mean support for a particular view or not.
Indeed so, Chair. Indeed so.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Ms. Mzimela, the minister's silence in the meeting, what did it mean to you?
Chair, I think that I actually indicated, even when I came to give a testimony, that one cannot actually recall the exact words. But for me, what I was highlighting is that I was a little bit taken aback that the minister did not say anything. And it just to also be clear, it's not about a minister speaking up to say he agrees with our position or not, but taken aback that an individual comes into a meeting, speaks to all of us in that meeting in the manner that he did, to a point of instructing that this is what the SAA management team should be doing. And no one says anything until the deputy minister actually speaks up. So even when the deputy minister speaks up, essentially what he is raising a concern about is that all of us are gathered to listen or give audience to the Jet Airways individuals, to position whatever proposal that they would have wanted to actually discuss. However, it is unacceptable for them to come into a meeting and begin to instruct us on what should actually happen. And that's what the deputy minister was also taking issue with, the instructive manner in which the individual was speaking. And that surprised me. It surprised me that it took the deputy minister to actually raise that as a concern when the minister was present in the room and the minister was the chair of the meeting.
Just to make sure I understand you, so is your evidence that you are not saying that the minister's silence meant that he agreed or didn't agree with the closing or not closing of the Mumbai route? All you are saying is that the manner in which Mr. Gowell, if that was his name, I can't remember, the Jet Airways representative was speaking to everybody at the meeting was unacceptable, and you expected the minister to put a stop to that. And the fact that he kept quiet is what concerned you in the face of this kind of behavior on the part of the representative of Jet Airways. Is my understanding of your evidence correct?
Yeah, so Chair, I think that, yes, for me, it is. It's the manner in which he actually spoke. And of course, in speaking was being instructive in basically indicating that SAA should just close the route and get off the route. So the reason why I'm saying, and I'm sticking purely to what I actually provided as evidence, Because I think the question that is being asked now is that possibly I must now try and I cannot determine what was going on in the minister's head on whether he was supportive or not supportive. I can only relay what I experienced and my take of the meeting. As I say, that I was quite surprised that somebody comes into a room, is rude, is loud, instructs, and that there is nobody, and the chairperson of the meeting says nothing, about that. Equally, I mean, if the intention of the meeting was to bring two parties who are potentially looking at building a relationship, I would find it very strange, Chair, that somebody comes into a meeting and instructs. And as I said, I mean, there is the chair who is sitting there, who is the minister of this entity that he has responsibility for overseeing, and is now listening to somebody give an instruction of how this entity must actually operate or not operate.
Mr. Gumbi?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Mzimela, I just want to go again to paragraph 12 and 13. Is it correct that both paragraph 12 and 13 does not mean that the minister authorized Mr. Mahlangu to be involved or maybe to interfere in the running of the SAA? I don't read paragraph 12 and 13 to say that the minister specifically instructed Mr. Mahlangu to do so.
Chair, you are, it is true that I could never go and say minister instructed Mr. Mahlangu, because I would have to have been there for him to have instructed Mr. Mahlangu. However, the point I make is that Mr. Mahlangu is the minister's advisor. And my understanding of the minister's advisor is that the minister's advisor works for the minister.
I understand that, but one question that I've asked, they say you are not saying that the minister instructed Mr. Mahlangu to have acted in a manner that he did. The answer would yes or no would do for now.
I would not have been there, Chair, to have actually had any instruction being given to Mr. Mahlangu.
It also does not mean that the protocols that you are referring to, that the minister was aware of. Because the minister...
let's repeat your question, Mr. Gumbi.
That paragraph 13 said no protocols were followed for engagement with the organization, that the established protocols were ignored. I cannot also read this paragraph to say that the minister was aware of those protocols, because you were not aware whether the minister knew them or not. Is that not correct?
Chair, I hear the question, but I will be honest that the question actually confuses me, because I will again go back and repeat. When a person comes, if I go to a meeting, or if I went to a meeting as the CEO of SAA, I would be representing SAA. And it is in that context that I'm saying the minister's advisor comes into an environment, and in my view, he is representing the minister's office. That's why he even had access to the organization. In the absence of him being viewed as a person who is representing the minister's office, he would not have even been provided access into our environment.
Okay, I think let's put the question this way. Do you know or do you not?
Pieces of legislation, there are prescripts that are applicable to SAA that I've mentioned about MOI, which is also accord with good corporate governance. Why would you say the minister would have known, especially such pieces of legislation which are applicable only to SAA?
Chair, again, I am absolutely, confused, because the assumption seems to be that those prescripts which apply specifically to SAA are in conflict with the PFMA and the Companies Act, and they're not.
Okay, maybe let me rephrase the question.
Let
Let me rephrase the question. As far as you're concerned, you had never briefed the minister about the MOI that is applicable to SAA. You had never briefed the minister about those prescripts, that the significance and materiality framework that is only applicable to SAA. As far as you are aware, you had not briefed him about that. So you can't say that the minister is ought to have known about those. Is that not correct?
So, Chair, my understanding is that, I mean, for everybody who gets appointed into office, that there would be an obligation for their officers to provide them with, or at least, what's the word? Induct them in terms of whatever the documents that are relevant, I mean, to them. As much as, I mean, when I take over as CEO, somebody in the office would have the obligation to ensure that I am actually familiar with whatever documents that govern the business are. And likewise, I would have thought that it would have been the responsibility of the department to be able to ensure that the minister is well aware of all of the various protocols and the various documentation. And then specifically to respond to the question, it would not have been my role to update the minister. That's not my, I have no obligation. And it was not in my space to be the one to share with the minister as to what is contained in each of these documents and how and what protocols should be in place between himself and the organization. But I would want to believe that the minister was quite familiar with those, for the mere fact that he would call the chairperson in trying to set up meetings and not myself.
Mr. Kumbi, we have gone way beyond 30 minutes. We have done over 45 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes more to cross-examine. But before you continue, I just want to say I'm getting the impression from your question that your instructions are that Minister Kigaba was not aware of the MOI of SAA. Are those your instructions?
No, Chair. I was saying that the assumption that he ignored, it created the impression, because you can only ignore what you know. So,
yes, but that's why I'm saying your question suggests to me that he was not aware, because otherwise, if his version is that he was aware, then I'm not sure that the question is helpful. And I would imagine Mr. Kigaba is likely to be the kind of person who would have taken the trouble to familiarize himself with a document such as the MOI of an important SOE like SAA.
Chair, what we don't have instructions with regard to that specifically, but all the data I need to submit with regard to this, because he had been appointed only for 2 months. There were many SOEs under his portfolio. So obviously some of the specific documents like MOI might need someone to eviscerate on them for him to understand. Understand about the PFA because it's overarching, but some prescripts such as MOI or those were specifically for SAA. It cannot be assumed that he was aware of them. Therefore, he ignored those kinds of prescripts. So those are my submissions with regard to that question, Chairperson.
Okay, all right. Your last 5 minutes starts now.
Yes, I'm there, Chair.
Can you see that? It says, after this meeting, I do not recall ever meeting Minister Giab to discuss the Mumbai route again. Can you see that? Now,
That's correct.
that was after the second meeting in Cape Town. Can you see that?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Now, if you read, I don't have to read it because I am under pressure of time. If you read from paragraph 65 up until paragraph 75, 75 says that it says that at the stage at which code-sharing agreement was concluded, the agreed terms were beneficial to SAA. The Jet Airways totally move off Johannesburg-Mumbai road and enhance added benefit to South Africa, to SAA and beyond the pause. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Can you, immediately after the minister disassociated himself from intervening or interfering, between this time in paragraph 65, when the minister was not involved, and also his advisor was not involved. Do you agree with me?
I do.
And everything that happened here, because the DG being your counterpart was involved up until the signing of the code-share agreement. Do you believe that? You agree with me?
No, the only thing that I
purportedly the minister was in favor of the SA Mumbai agreement that you did not want, but he was not involved from this stage up until the signing, nor was Mr. Matlagu involved at this stage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, the signing of the SA of the code share agreement was in accordance with the prescripts.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So there was nothing wrong with it.
That's correct.
And then my question is, assuming that for the purposes of this cross-exam, that in any event, the only agreement that was signed, it was code-share agreement during your tenure. Is that not correct?
That's
then,
correct.
In this instance, the minister was not involved and his advisor was not involved. Everything was done according to the prescripts. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Now it says that in any event, the minister's advisor interference does not bring about any process which is signing of the contract or any signing of an agreement which was not consistent with the SAA prescripts.
Yeah. So, Chair, I mean, once again,
in any what I'm trying to say that his involvement did not have anything to do with the balance sheet of SAA or anything for that matter, because it was never taken to a further step, did not bear any fruit. That's correct.
So,
and also that is applicable to.
So, Chair,
okay,
I wanted to respond to that.
I think finish your question if you haven't finished it, Mr. Kombi, and then Ms. Mzimela can then respond.
Yes.
So my question to you, Ms. Mzimela, was that to any conclusion of a contract that was not consonant with a PFMA or any of the prescripts that you have mentioned. Is that not correct?
That's correct, Chair. But let's, I think it is also important not, again, I think that we're reading one line and not putting everything into context. Right from the beginning, the management already indicated that we were in discussions with Jet Airways on the code share agreement. So there's never been, and there was never any dispute about that. So right from the beginning, even in the first meeting, the very first meeting with the minister, we indicated that we are in discussions with Jet Airways on a code share agreement. The only thing that we were not in agreement with is that we were not going to finalize that code share agreement on the basis that SAA terminates off the route. And those discussions and the various meetings and what you deem or what the advocate actually deems as interference had nothing to do with the co-chair and how that co-chair should be shaped, but it was really around the closure of the Mumbai route. And you're absolutely correct that both management and the board at the time did not accede to the closure of the Mumbai route. What we did is that we still concluded that agreement on the basis of what we thought was correct for the organization, which was a co-chair agreement.
Chair, just last 3 questions, maybe general propositions with regard to this. And I understand I don't have much time.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 instead of 3.
Just alluded to. And you can say that in your statement that, in fact, the co-chair agreement enhanced added benefit to SA on beyond points. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
You are actually the driver of this co-chair agreement, isn't that so?
Indeed, which is why I refer even from the first instance that I was a driver even from the start until there were these meetings.
So eventually, strip of all verbiage, eventually the agreement that was signed, you were the driver of it, being the co-chairing agreement. The minister was not involved, nor his advisor was involved in coming to this agreement. So all being said, the involvement of the minister or the involvement of his advisor had nothing to do with this contract that has been signed, you being the driver. Is that correct?
So, Chair, I think I have already indicated that is actually true, that we, when I say we, I mean both the management and the board stuck to their guns in ensuring that they concluded exactly what they believed was correct for SAA, which was purely a co-chair agreement. So I do think that it is kudos to both the management and the board for understanding what their roles were in relation to governance, and that we had the right to make sure that in everything that we do, we take SAA into consideration first. So I agree with you that in the end, that's exactly the type of agreement that was signed.
And Chair, just lastly, and in the end,
Mr.
I don't want to take advantage. This is that the minister wanted the closure of SA Mumbai route. So the minister eventually did not get what he wanted. Is that correct?
Is that a question?
Yes, because all that was actually negotiated is a co-share, not the closure. So the minister did not get what he wants, because he wanted, assuming that he wanted the closure of SA Mumbai route.
Yeah, so I won't say that, I'm not going to comment about what the minister wanted, what the minister did not want. But the one thing that I can actually, and I'll go back again to say, we concluded the co-chair agreement on the basis of what was agreed within the organization was beneficial to SAA. If the minister, because we believe that that was the route that we needed to take, and our view was that if the minister had a different viewpoint, then he should put it in writing, because he would always have had the ability to instruct in writing, but that was never forthcoming. And therefore, we did what we were supposed to do in light of what we thought was beneficial to SAA.
Chair, I don't want to take advantage of this.
I want that's it, Mr. Kumbi.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Mybeck, do you, oh, no, counsel for Ms. Mzimela, do you have any re-examination?
Chairperson, there are no questions in re-examination.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Mybeck, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, DCJ. I just have one question.
Yes.
Having instructed Mr. Mhlangu in any way, I just want to ask you one question about that. And it relates to the second meeting, the Cape Town meeting.
Yeah.
I think everyone will be familiar with what you say in your statement, your affidavit at paragraph 61 at page 269, where you explain, and I'm going to paraphrase, that on your version, Mr. Mthlangu treated you rudely. You say at paragraph 62 that you lost your temper and that throughout this, Mr. Gigaba remained silent. If I could take you, please, to paragraph 62.1 over the page, at page 270. You say that days after the meeting, Mr. Mthlangu would telephone me to request a few minutes of my time. He offered to take the Gautrain to meet with me. We met at the Intercontinental Hotel at the O.R. Tambo International Airport. And this is the sentence that I would like you to comment on so far as instructions are concerned. He personally apologized to me for his bad behavior and informed me to the effect that at the end of the day, he was just doing his job and acting on instruction. Now, how did you understand that? On whose instruction was Mr. Mthlangu allegedly acting?
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you, and that's absolutely correct. That's exactly what transpired after the meeting in Cape Town. And my understanding of him indicating that he was acting on instruction is that his only boss was the minister. And therefore, he was acting on instruction.
To behave in the manner that you've described.
Yes, and to raise the issues that he raised at the meeting in Cape Town.
Thank you, Chairperson. We have no other questions.
Thank you. Were there other examples, Ms. Mzumela, that you were aware of or that indicated the gray areas, things that were done which should not have been done by either the minister or his advisor, that you were aware of, that you did not deal with?
I think, Chair, the manner in which the manner in which the second meeting was handled as way for me was a very clear indication of another area, another gray area. And if I could just take you back, I mean, very quickly, is that I think I would have actually indicated that a call had been actually put through to the chair of the board to meet in Cape Town at very short notice, which is why she was not able to attend, and I had to attend together with Mr. Daka. In going through to the meeting, our understanding was that we were going to be probably having a discussion relating to the financial situation of SAA. But on our arrival there, so no forewarning, that what would happen is that, so on our arrival in Cape Town, the meeting then was focused on nothing else except for the Mumbai route and the closure of the Mumbai route. In addition to that, nobody had actually informed us that Jet Airways would be at the meeting. As I indicated, that we then established that the Jet Airways people had been sitting outside when we're having the initial meeting with the minister, and then they were invited, to join. If the ministry was well aware that the discussion was supposed to be a discussion on Mumbai and that they had external guests that they were invited, they are the shareholder of the entity and should have probably communicated that correctly and indicated what information needed to be prepared for that meeting. That did not happen. Instead, we were ambushed effectively by the presence of Jet Airways people, and firstly, by even the discussion on Jet Airways, because we do not understand that that's what we're at that meeting for. So that is another example, Chair, from my side.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. We are done. Thank you for availing yourself, Ms. Mzumela. Thank you, Mr. Gumbi. Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Thank you, Mr. Mybeck. Thank you, Mr. Theo. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Ms. Mzumela, you want to say something?
Am I allowed to say something, Chair? There is something that I feel quite strongly about.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yes. So, Chair, I think, firstly, you thanked me for coming through to commission and availing myself to the commission once again. I think the first time around, it was one's doing one's duty to the country in coming forward with whatever evidence that we had. But when then Mr. Gigaba requests a cross-examination, for some of us, we've never had to find ourselves in that space, which obviously meant that I would had to also bring in lawyers from my side in order to assist me in is that I'm going to have to pay for my lawyers while Mr. Kigaba's lawyers are paid for by the state. My taxpayers' money. I take exception with that.
Yes.
I really do.
Well, is your concern, does your concern relate to why is the state not paying for your lawyer just as it is paying for Mr. Gigaba's lawyers, or is your concern that none of you should be paid for by or none of your lawyers should be paid for by the state?
Yes, I think it's a second, Chair.
Yes.
I think, for me, it is one's choice, to come and assist, the commission. But if the process, that we follow,
yes.
How many people would be in a position to also be able to engage their own lawyers to assist them? And my question is that how fair is that his lawyers get paid for by the state, which is my tax money, and everybody's actually tax money. So I'm wondering, why is that? And I do take quite serious exception to that.
Yeah. Okay, no, I hear you. Mr. Solomon, I don't know if you want to say anything. You might not wish to say anything, but I don't want you to think I didn't give you a chance to say something.
Chair, one's a bit taken aback by what Ms. Msimela says. Mr. Gigaba is entitled to be represented by the state, and one wonders why she has some particular axe to grind with Mr. Gigaba, but we'll deal with that in legal submissions.
Yes. Okay, all right. Mr. Mybeck, did you want to say anything?
No, just to remind you, DCJ, that you and I have another order of business after the completion of this hearing relating to Mr. Mohammed's affidavit. So I suppose others can go, but please don't cut me off.
No, thank you for reminding me. I'd forgotten about it. Thank you, Ms. Mzimela. I think maybe in relation to your concern, Ms. Mzimela, all I can say is that I'm sure different people in the country have different views about the issue you raise. I understand that there is some law that is understood to be as to ministers and maybe other government officials when there are legal proceedings that relate to the time to what they did or did not do when they were in office. But I can't say anything more than that. I understand that there is some basis. We know what's in the public domain about litigation relating to the former president and legal assistance that had been given to him. So I can't say much. I'm not the one who grants, who makes those decisions. But thank you very much for availing yourself, and thank you, Mr. Solomon. Thank you, Mr. Kumbi. Thank you, Mr. CEO. And I will now excuse all of you except Mr. Mybeck and his team. Thank you very much. You are now excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Maybeck, do you want me to take a short break and then we continue, or maybe we should just try and do this and get over it and then adjourn?
Yes, I think we could deal with it quite swiftly, Chairperson, if that suits you.
Yeah, okay.
I've asked your registrar to have available application SEQ 36/2019. That is the affidavit of Mr. Yusuf Mohammed. Do you have it?
I think she's only now going to pick it up.
You will recall that Mr. Yusuf Mohammed brought a Rule 3.4 application in relation to certain evidence given by Mr. Callard as to Mr. Mohammed's role in the 1064 locomotive transaction. What Mr. Mohammed originally wanted to do, DCJ, was to present this affidavit and also to give oral evidence. This was an application that came before you and you granted it. Sometime after that, an agreement was entered into between Mr. Mohammed and the Commission. This is in December of 2019, to the effect that his affidavit would be placed on record before the Commission. A short summary of his affidavit would be delivered by you during a public hearing, and that in the circumstances he wouldn't testify.
Short summary would, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the parts. A short summary would?
So a short summary would be delivered by the chairperson during a public hearing, and then in the circumstances he wouldn't testify. Now, DCJ...
Was I party to such an agreement? I don't...
No, you weren't. But
did somebody decide? Did somebody decide that they would impose that on the chairperson?
Well, insofar as that was done, I relieved you of that responsibility on Friday because I wrote to Mr. Mohammed and I asked him and suggested.
But I'm interested in knowing who is the person that thought they could do that.
In fairness, in that email that I've referred you to, the author did say that this would be communicated to you, DCJ, for consideration. But
okay.
That has been resolved in this way.
Okay.
On Friday of last week, I wrote to Mr. Mohammed and I said that it would be more appropriate that I, as evidence leader, provide the summary and present it to you. And Mr. Mohammed thought summary of this affidavit and then ask you for it to be admitted into evidence.
Yeah.
DCJ, by way of a short summary, you will see at paragraph 1.1 of the affidavit that Mr. Mohammed at all material times was the general manager, office of the group chief financial officer. And if you skip forward all the way to page 4, to paragraph 2.7, he says, I proceed now to provide context around my involvement in the 1064 locomotive business case and deal with Mr. Callard's statement. And if I could then take you to page 6, at paragraph 3.3, he says, relevant to any role I played in the business case, I draw your attention to the fact that he was on leave for the period 1 November 2012 to 28 February 2013. And then at 3.4, the 1064 transaction advisors were appointed on the 6th of December 2012. At 3.5, the 1064 transaction advisors were deployed to support the internal teams. The business case was the responsibility of TFR, supported by GCIA and McKinsey. At 3.6, he says, I had no role in any capacity on the 1064 locomotive project team, including but not limited to the following. And then DCJ at paragraph 4, which was in a landscape form, At paragraph 4.2, he says, I can confirm that at no stage did I calculate or verify the calculations of forex hedging, forex escalation, and other price escalations. And then at 4.3, in my view, based on my recollection and a review of documents, the sequence of events of the approval stroke recommendation of the ETC, and that's in the business case, quote, excluding the potential effects from forex hedging, forex escalation, and other price escalations at various committees were as follows. You will recall, DCJ, that evidence has been given already, that Mr. Mohammed was the person that actually made this amendment on the business case, the excluding amendment. He sets out in the table the various decisions. And perhaps I could then take you to page 8 and ask you to have a look in the middle of the page at paragraph 5.1.2. It seems that this is the essence of it. The change, says Mr. Mohammed, was on the instruction of Mr. Singh to align the business case to the approval memoranda and submissions of the committees listed above, and represented a mere transfer of the information that was already approved. At paragraph 5.1.2.1, in making the edits of Mr. Singh, I would have acted upon his instruction and trusted his knowledge as he was intimately involved in the business case. And then at page 9, DCJ, Mr. Mohammed concludes at paragraph 5.1.4 by saying, I confirm that, sub 1, I had no role in any capacity on the 1064 locomotive project team stroke streams for finance, procurement, commercial operations, business case, technical and legal. Sub 2, at no stage did I calculate or verify the calculations of forex hedging, forex escalation and other price escalations. Sub 3, I was not part of any of the governance committees that approved the ETC of 38.6 billion rand, quote, excluding the potential effects from forex hedging, forex escalation, and other price escalations. And sub 4, the business case was the responsibility of TFR, supported by GCIA and McKinsey. I think the long and the short of it, DCJ, is that Mr. Mohammed says that he played no role in the 1064 case other than for affecting the amendment, the exclusion amendment, as we call it, on the instruction of Mr. Singh.
Yes.
If that suffices as a fair summary of Mr. Mohammed's affidavit, I would then ask you, please, DCJ, to admit into evidence then Mr. Yusuf Mohammed's affidavit attested to on the 17th of May, 2019.
And do you have an exhibit number or something that we will use? What exhibit we'll call it?
Well, I suppose for present purposes, it could just be under SEQ 36 of 2019. I am aware of the fact that Mr. Mohammed has previously put up an affidavit as a particular exhibit. If you could just maybe give me a second, I can try and find it, DCJ.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
DCJ, Mr. Yusuf Mohammed's exhibit is exhibit BB4 in brackets G. And under that exhibit, an affidavit has already been entered. Perhaps I could ask you then to admit this affidavit dated the 17th of May 2019 as Exhibit BB4 in brackets G.1.
That's BB4 in bracket G, then 0.1.
Yes, DCJ.
Okay. Mr. Yusuf Mohammed's affidavit that was deposed to on the 17th of May 2019. And appears or is contained in file SEQ 36/2019, is admitted as an exhibit and will be marked as PP4 open brackets G close brackets 0.1.
Thank you, DCJ.
Okay, thank you. I hope you did get a message last week that you will just have to remember that we do the same with regard to some of the affidavits that came late, such as the one for Mr. Mkwanazi in relation to Mr. Mlefe's appointment.
I did get that message. I was wondering, DCJ, would it be in order if I was to provide you with a written order that you could make and sign, or is it something that you want to deal with on the record publicly like we have now?
I think it's preferable that we just arrange and deal with it publicly. So there's a transcript that refers to it, and there is that transparency.
Yes.
So I think once you are ready, we could do that. We could just find time and do that.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps I could do it at a time where I've parceled together all the various affidavits that we may want you to. Thank you, DC.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll adjourn. Thank you.